Welcome back to the Under 24 podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Jason. It's been a year, but we're back on the podcast. How you doing, bro?
Doing pretty good, bro. Ready to start this up again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we're back talking about what the people love, which is sports. We got a lot of stuff, including the NBA Finals, our predictions, and our thoughts on the NFL offseason moves. The NBA Finals are underway, and on Thursday we had Game 1 of the Finals between the Golden State Warriors and Boston Celtics. The Warriors, who seemingly to the Finals, had Game 1 in their hands, but the Celtics, who had one of the toughest roads to the big stage, came back, with Al Horford and Derek White leading the way. So with that being said, who do you think will win the NBA Finals, and who will be your Finals MVP?
Well, Jeremy, in my opinion, I think the Warriors are going to win in 7. I think the Warriors have more weapons, and I think the finals are really just about which offense is going to outplay the opposing defense, because these two defenses were the top 2 defenses in the league this year. And considering how many weapons the Warriors have in their arsenal, like Jordan Poole, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, and most of all Steph Curry, I just feel like they have a more potent offense than the Celtics. However, how you saw it in Game 1 was the Warriors had a great lead, had a 12-point lead heading into the fourth quarter. But as you saw, Al Horford, Derek White, and Jaylen Brown led the way and just were on fire. I think the Celtics were 7 for 7 on their three-pointers to start out the fourth quarter. So whenever you get hot like that, it's very hard to stop a team who gets hot like that from 3. And along with that, they played lockdown defense on Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Jordan Poole wherever they went, causing turnovers and wreaking havoc and creating issues for that Warriors offense and disrupting it. So I think it's a very tough series that's going to go 7 games. Yesterday was a great game, and I think it's going to be like that every single game. But I do think the Warriors are going to pull it out just because they have the better offense.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Yesterday's game, in Game 1, what Steph Curry did in the first quarter was amazing. 21 points, 6 made in the first quarter, and finals record. And after that first quarter, he only dropped 13 points in the remaining 3 quarters. He had 34 points in the game. And what the Celtics did is that they stopped Steph Curry. They didn't let him shoot the ball, and they made him pass the ball to others and make others give points on their. And the Celtics played amazing defense. Steph Curry has shot 33% when guarded by Marcus Smart in the past 5 seasons, right? So Marcus Smart, he can guard Steph Curry. And they also have Derek White. And Derek White hasn't been amazing shooting from 3-point range, as he only shot 31% from 3. But yes, in Thursday's game, he shot amazing. He was hitting all his 3-point shots, and the shots that went in, were necessary for the Celtics because they got that comeback. They came back and won that game. So with that being said, I'd say the Warriors in 6. Even though the Celtics won, I don't think the Celtics can replicate that same type of performance again. Jason Tatum didn't play his best basketball yet in Game 1.
Definitely.
He didn't shoot as well, but he was involved in the offense, passing the ball. But if you want a good game from the Celtics, you need Jason Tatum to play well. The Warriors, you can always rely on them. They have amazing players: Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Andrew Wiggins. So these players can step up and make their shots, right? But you don't want to count out the Celtics. They've been able to come back and take games, just like they did in Game 1. Their main problem may be with chemistry, and they have had many lineups throughout the playoffs. So you don't know if they'll be consistent with this.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. How do you think Jaylen Brown fits into it? Because I think he's a really good shooter, but when he's not on his game, like how he was the first couple quarters, they do not play good. Do you think he's going to be the X factor for it?
I feel like Jaylen Brown, he's not really moved by the pressure. He knows how to play. He's been in the league for a long time now. Be in these certain situations because he's been to the Eastern Conference Finals 4 out of his last 6 seasons. and it will just come to him. With Jason Tatum is who I'm really more scared of, because if he's not getting his shots, he probably won't have a good game if he doesn't get his shots in the first quarter. You really don't know.
Yeah, I agree. With that being said, I think my Finals MVP is going to be Steph Curry because, throughout that first quarter, he was just incredible. 21 points and 6 threes. Like you said, that was a Finals record. It's just incredible to see someone play like that, even though a bunch of them were open. I do think he's going to be able to make adjustments for the upcoming games, and I think that's going to be the key in the Warriors taking it in 7. But your prediction was Warriors in 6, right?
Yes, that was Warriors in 6, and I also have Steph Curry's winning Finals MVP. You also.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. You can go.
Okay. How much of a factor do you think Jordan Poole's going to play into this series? Because I don't think he showed up too well last night.
I think Jordan Poole is one of those X factor players, right? You can rely on him always. You've seen it in the Memphis series where he shot amazing. He can be the number 2, even the number 1 option at times. So Jordan Poole is there. It's just that if he's needed, he can always step up. He's coming off the bench, so he's going against the Celtics bench basically.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think he'll play a big part in the series too, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, and you mentioned X factors and key players. So who do you think are some key players in this series?
Well, I think for each team, I have one for each team, and for the Warriors, I think it's Andrew Wiggins. I think Andrew Wiggins is going to be play a huge part in this series, especially considering how he played last series against the Mavericks. He put a lot of pressure on Luka, and even though Luka still dropped 30 points a game, I think Andrew Wiggins slightly wore him down when it came to the fourth quarter and other parts of the game like that. Continuing that, I feel like he's going to play a key role playing defense on Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, because those are your top 2 scorers on that team, and I feel like you need to put your best perimeter defender, obviously, on those 2 top players on the team. Secondly, he's going to be a key rebounder. Last series, he got a lot of rebounds, and that was very helpful in creating a rebounding advantage for the Warriors. But this series, there's a lot of big players on the Celtics, like Al Horford, Robert Williams, Grant Williams, and they can all get rebounds. So I think it's really important that he helps the team out, the Warriors out, with his rebounding. And he needs to take pressure off of Steph, Clay, and Poole, because the Celtics have enough defenders to cover all 3 of those players. So he needs to come and become that great 4th option. And then for the Celtics, I think it's Derek White. As you saw this game 1, if Derek White didn't start making threes, the Celtics would have never got on that momentous run that allowed them to destroy the Warriors in the fourth quarter. Without him, they wouldn't have been able to go on that run. And he's a key 3-and-D role player. So teams always need those. And especially with him being a point guard that can move the ball around and help facilitate the offense, I think he's going to be a key part and X factor in this series for the Celtics as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. For the Warriors, I have Travon Walker as an X factor. If you look at the statistics, he might not be the best, but in 20 minutes, he's getting 8 boards, and most of them are being offensive rebounds. With Travon Walker as your big man, you need him to get those boards. Like you said, the Celtics have many great big men: Al Horford, Robert Williams, Grant Williams. So with Travon Walker there, he can get many offensive rebounds just like he did in Game 1, and get those hockey assists. For the Celtics, it's Derek White and Grant Williams. Derek White, we know he is an amazing defensive point guard. He can play amazing defense, and he can play make as well. And when he comes to him, he can hit his threes. Will he be consistent every series, every game like that? Probably not from 3-point land. But you can rely on Derek White defensively. The Warriors bench also, Jordan Poole, Otto Porter Jr., and Iguodala are underrated players, right? Jordan Poole is coming off the bench, and you have Otto Porter Jr. and Iguodala. Those 2 players, Porter and Iguodala, know what to do and make the right decisions at the right time. And Jordan Poole can also go off at any time necessary.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think Jordan Poole is going to play, I already asked the question, but I think Jordan Poole is going to play a huge role in this series. because he's going to take pressure off of Steph and Clay. But I think, like we said, I think Otto Porter Jr., Gary Payton, and Andre Iguodala coming back from injury are huge for the Warriors because those are three great defenders who can move the ball on offense, especially Iguodala. Like, when he was on the court yesterday, from what I can see in the game, he was one of the key facilitators along with Draymond Green and defenders helping out for the Warriors. So I think those are some huge additions that they got from injury.
Yeah, not to mention Iguodala's finals experience. He has had a bunch of finals experience with the Warriors and with the Miami Heat.
And he won a finals MVP, so he knows what he's doing.
Yeah. So we talked about the NBA Finals, and now let's talk about the impact it will have on both of these teams. These two teams have much history and are considered great franchises, but they will continue to carry on this legacy. So win or lose, how does this series impact the Celtics?
Well, in my opinion, it doesn't affect them too much because Jaylen Brown's 25 and Jason Tatum's, I think, 24. And being that young, you can't really hold it against them if they lose. If they win, it's going to be a big boost for them because they're so young. But I don't think it's going to make a huge difference for them. Along with that, they have, before this series, their entire team has 0 games of finals experience. For the record, there's only been 3 times where one team has had more than 100 games of final experience and the other has had no games. So considering that they have no games of final experience, I don't think it's going to hurt them too much if they lose. And if they win, it's just going to be more positive and more applauding to them. And most of their key players are under contract next season. So even if they don't win this series, they can run it back next year and have a great chance to win next year.
Yeah, I agree with you. With the win, the Celtics can reclaim the most NBA titles by one franchise with 18 titles, and it helps their court stay together. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are both young players, like you said, so this doesn't affect them too much. With the loss, it may hurt them, but it doesn't hurt them significantly. This team is going to run it back next year, and they have all their players under contract except end of the bench type players that are free agents this upcoming off season. So with the loss, Celtics, but you have to also consider that these Eastern Conference teams are going to get stronger. The Nets, who they swept in the playoffs, are going to be a tough team with Ben Simmons, Kyrie Irving, Kevin. So with the Celtics getting this far, I don't know if you want to say that with the loss that it's fine for them because they can make some changes in the off season.
So who do you think is like you said, it's going to be a lot harder for them next year to advance to the finals. So who would you take next year?
Next year, it would be hard. There's many teams like the Miami Heat, Brooklyn Nets, Milwaukee Bucks are still there. Probably next year may be the Milwaukee Bucks. They just lost Game 7 against the Boston Celtics, and I feel like they'll be back. Yeah, without Middleton especially. So they'll be back. I have the Bucks coming back.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a good point. Where do you put the Sixers? Because they have had a lot of issues with Harden. So considering that they're supposed to be finals contenders, where would you put them?
For the Sixers, it's going to be hard because during this season, you had all the drama between Ben Simmons, and then during the trade deadline, you traded for James Harden, and it kind of changed everything up. So they had to fix their rotations and have build that chemistry back up. So with James Harden being here, hopefully for this full entire season, maybe getting a new contract, I feel like the 76ers can be the 3 or 4 seed, but they have the potential to get to the finals, right? It just depends on James Harden and Doc Rivers. People kind of forgot that Doc Rivers, made the adjustment to start DeAndre Jordan when Joel Embiid was out, which was not the best decision in the world. So if you just make the right adjustments, I feel like the 76ers could be contenders.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Personally, I think James Harden is pretty washed, to be honest. I don't think he's going to come back to how he's been playing because I just think he's too slow to get to the rim at the same pace he was before. And especially because he's not taking care of his body like how other players like LeBron James do. I just don't think that he's going to get back on that level. And I think the Celtics are still going to be favorites to come out, even though the Nets will get stronger and the Bucks will get stronger. I just think that their defensive presence is just too much for other teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. So we've talked about the Celtics. Now let's look at the Warriors side. With the win or loss, how does this impact the Warriors?
I think it doesn't impact them much at all, whether it be win or lose. Obviously, it's good if they win, bad if they lose. But I think it's more individual because I think Steph Curry's legacy will be more impacted by this series than the Warriors as a whole will be. Because the Warriors, they came back from winning just 15 games, being 15 and 50 2 years ago. And this is Klay's first year back. So I still think they have 3 to 4 years of championship window in them left. But like I said before, I think it's mostly on Steph's legacy and how he'll look. Because some people really think that he needs a finals MVP to cement himself as the GOAT point guard compared to players like Isaiah Thomas and Magic Johnson. And in my opinion, I think he already is probably the greatest point guard to ever live, considering that he's the greatest shooter to ever live. And he's won multiple championships, albeit with Kevin Durant. I just think that he's really dominated the game. And because of that, he doesn't need a finals MVP. But some people will require that he has that validation. So for the Warriors, I don't think it impacts them too much. But for Steph, I think it can be quite impactful in the eyes of most people.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think the series will hurt the Warriors in any way. If they win, it will only help them. It'll help cement the Warriors dynasty, keep Steph, Klay, and Draymond, make the case for one of the best dynasties to play, right? These three have been together for almost like more than a decade, right? So they know what they're doing. Steph Curry, he wins, he's going to win that Finals MVP. And Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, they are all going to have the same amount of rings as LeBron James, which will further push Steph Curry as one of the greatest players of all time. So if they lose, it really won't have any effect on them. They've lost a great opportunity. But I mean, you have young players like Jordan Poole, Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody that can step up and hopefully fulfill and take the place of Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the Warriors have a lot of youth on their team that they can bring into contention over the next many years, over the next decade possibly, depending on the development of Kuminga and Poole and Wiseman and Moody and all these players. But I have a question that is an overarching question. Which team do you think has more pressure on them to win this series?
Pressure-wise, I feel like it would be the Celtics. I mean, you've made the Eastern Conference Finals 4 out of the last 6 seasons, 3 out of the last 5 times when Jason Tatum has been part of the Celtics. And you have been in Game 7 in 2018, you were 1 game away. You got lost to LeBron, and then you lost to Miami. And so this Celtics team has been, just right there. It's been that close to getting to the finals. And now that they're here, they have that pressure because I know Celtics fans want the Celtics to win because they've been in this situation many, many times. So they just want them to win and get that pressure over with. And without, if the Celtics don't win, you probably have that same kind of mindset on Tatum as you did as Booker in this last year, as he's, he went from underrated to highly overrated. So I don't know if the Celtics fans want that and they might, at least want to make it a series, best of 6, best of 7.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting take, but respectfully, I think that it's the Warriors because, like I said before, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are young, and with Robert Williams and Grant Williams and Peyton Pritchard all being so young as well, I think they can extend their championship window to 8 or 9 years. But the Warriors, I think there's only 3 years left. Steph is already 34. Clay's already 32, I believe, and Draymond's 32 as well, I believe, something like that. And they only have 3 years left of their championship window because those are the big three. They're going to age. And although they have that youth that we talked about before, I think it's going to take multiple years before they develop into a championship contender. So it's not going to be a smooth transition where they're going to be a championship contender through each era of players. I do think that the pressure is more on the Warriors because of that shortened championship window, and because, like I said, Steph needs that validation from a lot of people. While Jason Tatum, they're just talking. People still make jokes that he's 19 years old. So I think the core window is just a lot longer for the Celtics, and I think because of that, the pressure's on the Warriors, especially considering how hard and how much adversity the Celtics dealt with to get to these finals.
Yeah, I respect your take, but the Warriors have won it multiple times, so I don't know if there's pressure on the Warriors, but I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a good point. Yeah.
We talked about the NBA Finals and we talked about the NBA. So let's move on to the NFL and some off-season moves. And let's grade these off-season moves. So the NFL free agency officially started on March 14th, and since then we've seen some players getting signed to huge contracts and also some franchise players being dealt to other teams. To say the least, this has been a crazy offseason. But with all these moves being made, who do you think made the best offseason move?
Well, first of all, I have to say which teams had the best offseason, because the Chargers and the Raiders had the best offseasons by a large margin. Even though the Broncos got Russell Wilson, well, let's just say the AFC West in general had a great offseason.
Yeah.
But the Chargers got Khalil Mack and J.C. Jackson, two incredible defensive players that will greatly boost their title chances. And the Raiders got Devontae Adams and Chandler Jones. And Adams played with Derek Carr at Fresno State in college, so they already have great chemistry. And I think they might not be title favorites, but they could definitely contend for it too. But I think the best move, which team made the best move, was the Colts when they traded for Matt Ryan. Because they got Matt Ryan for a third-round pick. And personally, I think he's worth at least a first-round pick or maybe a high second-round pick and maybe some more. And the Colts, in the past 5 years, they've had 5 different starters. After playing with Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck for the past 2 decades, they went into a quarterback purgatory these past 5 years. And to get a player like Matt Ryan for such low value, I think that it's a great move for them, especially considering that if they had him instead of Wentz last year, they'd be in the playoffs. And I think with Matt Ryan this year, even though they might need to get one more good wide receiver, I think he gives them a genuine shot to go deep into the playoffs.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think the Chargers made the necessary moves. They got J.C. Jackson and Khalil Mack, and they did this while Herbert was on his rookie deal. So they had a lot of money to spend and spent it wisely. They got these 2 Pro Bowlers, and they addressed their defensive and their secondary needs. And I agree with you with the Raiders as well. But with the Raiders, they still have to address the situation of Darren Waller and his contract extension. Do you think the Chargers or the Raiders will get a deal done with Waller this offseason?
I think so. I think they still have a good amount of cap space, even though they've committed so much to these different players like Carr, Adams, and Jones. And especially considering that they have a genuine shot to contend for a title, I don't think Darren Waller is going to have a problem signing with them, because I think they're going to give him money, especially playing in Las Vegas, that big market. I don't think it's going to be an issue of money. It is going to be an issue of money, but I don't think that there's going to be any bad negotiation between them, especially considering that he'll have so much open field with Devontae Adams right next to him.
Yeah, I agree with you. So going back to the best offseason move, I feel like one of the most underrated ones, or not talked about, was the A.J. Brown to the Eagles. It's the Eagles, a number 1 receiver, and you have to look at this Eagles team made the wild card last year. So with them adding A.J. Brown as well, they can be a threat to the NFC East with AJ Brown being traded there.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I just have to say, the Eagles, like, their improvement level is just off the charts this past year. I mean, from getting AJ Brown and getting Jordan Davis in the draft, they had 3 first-round picks this year. I think they traded the other 2, but it's just incredible how much they've improved from last year. I think the only problem they have is seeing what Jalen Hurts' development is like. But other than that, I think they have a great chance to be great. But one more move that we didn't talk about is the Cleveland Browns getting Amari Cooper and Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson, it was a heavy deal, but they got Amari Cooper for a 5th-round pick. Like, that's just crazy to me.
Crazy.
They got a wide receiver 1 for a 5th-round pick, and they are barely paying any of his cap hit too, because the Cowboys have a big penalty for trading him, so they're going to be covering most of his money. So I think that's going to be a huge move. But yeah, I think that's a huge move, and I think he's going to be a great addition to them, especially after moving on from OBJ and Jarvis Landry. And I think with him, they're going to be probably one of the best teams in the AFC.
Yeah, not to mention that the Browns also have Nick Chubb and Clowney, who they re-signed last 2 weeks. So we talked about
for them.
Yeah, amazing. So we talked about these best offseason moves, but every year we see some teams disappoint after trying to go out and acquire players. And this year is no different. Who do you think, or what do you think is one of the worst acquisitions from the offseason?
Well, I'm going to bring this to the draft because I cannot believe the Jaguars picked Travon Walker with the first pick. I mean, that was out of nowhere. Everyone, if you were betting on that, you would have lost money real quick because nobody expected him to be drafted with the first pick. Firstly, edge rusher isn't even their biggest need. They have Clavon Chason and Josh Allen to rush on the edges. And they're not the best edge rushers, but they're pretty good. I think their biggest need was O-line. Cam Robinson was very inconsistent for them last year, and they franchise tagged him, so I guess they kept him, and they're going to pay a big amount of money for him. But they needed O-line help to protect Trevor Lawrence really badly because he could not play very well because of all the pressure that was coming to him. Travon Walker was the Pro Football Focus's 12th ranked prospect, and they picked him first overall. They picked him over Kayvon Thibodeau, Aiden Hutchinson, who are the 2 best edge rushing prospects, and Derek Stingley Jr., who's the best cornerback prospect, and the top 2 offensive tackle prospects in Evan Neal and Ikem Okwenu. So I just think they lost a lot of value for a first-round pick, on top of paying $18 million for a year for Christian Kirk when Cooper Kupp gets paid $15 million. I just think those couple of acquisitions that the Jaguars made through the draft and free agency, I think they could have been a lot better, and I just think that those are possibly the worst acquisitions in the NFL offseason.
Oh, when you talked about Travon Walker going number 1, I disagree with you, right? The reasons why the Jaguars took him number 1 is because he had the raw potential. He's an athletic player and he can play. He hasn't really found a position, that he can really fit into. So with Travon Walker, with all his raw talent that he has, he can be one of the best players that come out of this draft. So with you saying that, that they should have taken other players over him, I can see why you would want them to. But with Travon Walker getting drafted by the Jaguars, he has all this potential that could hopefully go well for the Jaguars.
Yeah, I understand that, but in my opinion, I just think, especially considering the Jaguars coaching staff, if you're going to pick Travon Walker, you need a coaching staff that can really develop him well. And I just think there were so many more surefire picks with that filled bigger needs for the Jaguars. I just thought that they made the wrong pick, in my opinion.
I don't know about that, but we have to wait until the season. But you talk about the Jaguars and the moves that you made. Christian Kirk to the Jaguars for 4 years, $72 million. I feel like that was way too much money for a guy that was wide receiver 2 for the Cardinals, right? He was wide receiver 2, and the Cardinals had DeAndre Hopkins there, and when you take away Christian Kirk, who wasn't really the best wide receiver, that you give him $18 million a year, which you said was more than Cooper Kupp, who just won a Super Bowl this offseason. I don't think he really has the potential to be that guy for the Jaguars.
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct. I think that they overpaid him way too much. I mean, Michael Thomas barely makes $1 million over him, and I just think there's so many better wide receivers that deserved more money than Christian Kirk. I'm not blaming him because you got to get the bag as an NFL player.
Yeah.
But I just think that was a huge overpay by the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, I agree. And so we talked about the players and teams and the moves that they made, but there's still a lot of free agents and trades that might be necessary before the season starts. So let's look at those NFL moves that are still needed around the league. So there's still a lot of time until the NFL season gets underway, and with OTAs just starting, teams are getting a look at their team. With that, some teams might want to make some changes. So which teams need to make a trade to upgrade their roster?
I think it's the Baltimore Ravens. Just like every year, they need wide receiver help. Now more than ever because they traded Hollywood Brown to the Cardinals. I think it's pretty questionable that they did it, but sometimes people just don't have chemistry, and that can lead to departures. But I think that they should trade for Michael Thomas. When I was looking at NFL salary, wide receiver salaries because of Christian Kirk's high salary, I realized that Michael Thomas is only getting $19 million a year. And that's significantly lower than other top receivers like Tyreek Hill, who's getting 30, and Devontae Adams, who's getting 28, and DeAndre Hopkins, who's getting 27. So I think that Michael Thomas is relatively cheap compared to the other top wide receivers, and he can still be one of the best when he's healthy. Obviously, he missed last season completely because he had ankle issues and surgery, but I think he can come back this year and be one of the top wide receivers. And I think he's not going to cost too much when it comes to trade compensation because of his recent issues in relationship with the Saints. Although that's died down a little, I wouldn't be surprised if it comes back to life when the NFL season comes closer. So I think the Ravens should definitely try to get him or sign a free agent wide receiver so that they can once again compete, because they need a wide receiver to compete in the AFC.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think the Ravens need to make a trade, and one player that I have in mind is Laviska Shenault Jr. With the Jaguars last year, and with Christian Kirk, Marvin Jones, and Zay Jones and Evan Ingram all getting signed by Jacksonville, he's kind of the odd man out. And he, if you're the Ravens, you might want to look to trade for him. And he has shown flashes of being a great wide receiver, and him being your wide receiver number one, can be it will be an experiment, but it could have a lot of potential in it as well. Some other teams that I feel like shouldn't make trades are the 49ers. I feel like they should keep Garoppolo for another year, especially with reports saying that Trey Lance has not been given the green light by the 49ers to be their QB number one. So I just want to get your opinion on that. Do you think the 49ers should keep Garoppolo for another year, or should they trade him?
Before the NFL free agency started, I thought that they should have cut him or traded him, because they could have got $26 million in cap space if they traded him or cut him. But now that a lot of the free agent market for offensive tackles and cornerbacks is dried up, I think that they should keep him, because there's no real point in trading him other than for draft compensation for next year. And I think the value that he has as a potential mentor, and he can still play good quarterback football, I think that value is still there. So I don't think that they should trade him now, but I think that they should have traded him a couple of months ago.
Yeah, he just came off that shoulder surgery, so it was tough for teams to kind of get a look at Garoppolo for this upcoming season.
Yeah. But moving on from them, do you think teams like the Vikings should move on from Kirk Cousins or someone like that? Because I feel like a lot of those mid-tier quarterbacks have gotten in a lot of fire lately, and I think that, like, and personally, I think that they shouldn't move on because, having Justin Jefferson in my fantasy leagues has done well. So I think that Kirk Cousins should stay, but I think a lot of people disagree with that.
Yeah, I feel like Kirk Cousins should stay, even though he's getting a lot of blame. Kirk Cousins has been a great quarterback, and with the Vikings hiring a new head coach, it will change the schemes a little bit. So hopefully, with that, Kirk Cousins will kind of elevate his game even more, and the Vikings will look to make a run this year and hopefully towards the Super Bowl. I think Kirk Cousins has been a kind of amazing quarterback. He's not really looked at as one of the best quarterbacks, but he can get the job done. And even though he has a few bad games, I feel like his amazing performances throughout the regular season kind of cover up for that.
Yeah, I think that he's a good regular season quarterback. I think that the Vikings have a decent shot to make the playoffs. I don't think that they're going to contend because Kirk Cousins just isn't that guy in the playoffs that can bring them a championship. But I do think they can be a better than average team in this league.
Yeah, I agree with that. So we still have a lot of free agents available. So where should these remaining NFL free agents sign? And how can some of these teams improve their roster?
Well, I think there's a lot of great free agent wide receivers still available, especially Odell Beckham Jr. I think he should go to the Packers because he probably wants another shot at a championship, and I don't think he's most concerned with money. And he can't be because of the fact that he's still a wide receiver this late into the offseason. And he's still a free agent this late into the offseason. So I think that he should just go into the best situation available. And considering that Devontae Adams is gone from the Packers, which is still crazy to think about, I think that since he's gone, I think Odell Beckham Jr. has a great chance to prove his worth as a potential number one wide receiver. And especially with playing with Aaron Rodgers, he'll definitely play better than he would in a lot of other situations. So I feel like he could greater improve his value, even being much older than he used to be. So I think that that's probably his best destination to go to, and it's been the best destination for months. And then another one is Julio Jones. I think he should go to the Browns personally because he can play second fiddle to Amari Cooper on the Browns. And especially with playing with Deshaun Watson pending his civil lawsuits, I think they're going to have a great chance to make Julio Jones look very good. But I think it's important that Julio Jones doesn't go to a team where he can be a number one wide receiver. I think he has to be a number two wide receiver now, especially because of his hamstring injuries. Because for wide receivers, once you have hamstring issues, you're going to have hamstring issues for the rest of your career. So I think it's important that he doesn't go to a place where he can be a number one wide receiver because he doesn't want to decrease his value more. And then finally, I think Riley Reif, an underrated right tackle, should go to the Chargers. The Chargers have already had a great offseason, and Riley Reif played big-time offensive line football for the Bengals before he got hurt in December. And I just feel bad for him because he could have helped a lot in that playoff run, especially against the Rams in those final plays, because the Bengals could have definitely won that if it weren't for their O-line issues. But I think he should go to the Chargers now because now they have a realistic shot to win a championship. And I think that they have a genuine need for right tackle, and it'll just be a win-win for both sides for him.
Yeah, I agree. I think Odell Beckham Jr. should stay with the Rams, but with their recent signings of Allen Robinson and also with Cooper Kupp being there, I don't know if he will go back to LA. He should go to a team like Baltimore. You mentioned that they don't really have a wide receiver. And with Odell being there, he can be their number one wide receiver, and he will give Lamar Jackson an option to throw to, right? But you said that Packers, I don't know really if he should go to the Packers. I think the main reason he was considered in connections with Green Bay was because of Davante Adams, and Davante Adams recruited him heavily when he got cut by Cleveland. So with Green Bay and Odell Beckham, even though it could be a great fit for him, I don't think it will happen.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. But my issue is, who do you think Green Bay should pair with Rodgers? Because right now he's playing with some no-name, no offense to those players, but a lot of no-name receivers. Like, I don't know if, he just doesn't have too many weapons on that team. He doesn't have a Pro Bowl level weapon on that team. So I think Odell Beckham Jr. Should go to the Packers because of that. But who would you pick to go to the Packers then?
As of right now, I mean, there's not really a lot of players because most of the wide receivers have either signed huge contracts or are pretty young players who probably are not going to get traded. So, you can make the stretch for maybe a Deebo Samuel, but that's a very unlikely,
very
possibility.
Stretchy,
So I don't really know for the Packers. Hopefully you can rely on your rookies to make some plays for you, and just rely on Aaron Rodgers because he is a great quarterback, so he can get the job done with or without Davante Adams. It just depends on their rookies and how they play this season.
Yeah, I think that's a decent take. Personally, I think they need a weapon badly because I don't think those young players can improve that much. But you talked about the Ravens and how OBJ can be that number one wide receiver for Lamar. But I don't even know if Lamar may play on the Ravens next year because he's been having some contract issues. Do you think they're going to have a contract signed by this upcoming year? Because he's been holding out from OTAs, and it seems like it could be a problem.
I feel like Lamar probably will sign. I mean, I understand his frustration because the Ravens had the opportunity to sign him to an extension when he wasn't valued as high as he is now. And so now they have to pay him a lot more money. And with Lamar not having an agent, he does this all by himself. So with Lamar holding out during OTAs, I feel like he will come back. And even if he doesn't, they have their backup quarterback, Tyler Huntley, I believe, is the backup. So, and he's been pretty good as a quarterback when Jackson was out. But I feel like that deal will get done soon.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's a lot of drama like every NFL season that will blow off. But I just think it's interesting because at this point, Lamar has a couple of better destinations that he could choose because of the terrible wide receiver situation in Baltimore.
Yeah, you just mentioned he has other options. What do you think the other options would be for Jackson?
Well, I think one of the biggest ones is Carolina. Carolina I think they still have Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore. And I think their defense is improving. They're slowly getting better. I think they picked an offensive tackle this draft. So they're just continuing to improve. And I think through that improvement, if they just add a quarterback, they could easily be championship contenders because a lot of their team is built to win other than their quarterback.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from with Carolina, and especially since Sam Darnold really hasn't been that quarterback since week 4 of the NFL season. But we'll see how this NFL season plays out and how off-season goes around. Thank you for listening to the Under 24 podcast. Thanks again to my co-host Jason for having a great discussion about NFL and the NBA. We hope.
Go ahead.
We hope that you share the word with others and support this podcast. Jason, you got any final thoughts?
Mavs are terrible. I'm just kidding. I think the Warriors are going to do good. Go Warriors. And Make sure to subscribe and follow our Instagram, and we'll catch y'all later.
Peace. Welcome back to the Under 24 podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Jason. It's been a year, but we're back on the podcast. How you doing, bro?
Doing pretty good, bro. Ready to start this up again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we're back talking about what the people love, which is sports. We got a lot of stuff, including the NBA Finals, our predictions, and our thoughts on the NFL offseason moves.